Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Win When They Say You Won't. My name is Michelle Eisenberg, and I am a program assistant at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit that is building a better path for entrepreneurs worldwide by improving inclusion, access, and knowledge in entrepreneurship. So as you will see in the chat in a moment, the Nasdaq Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to entrepreneurs across all races, industries, and geographies. So definitely make sure to check out those links and resources in the chat. And then just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, let us know where you are dialing in from in the chat. And second, we're going to open up for a live Q&A at the end of the event. So please make sure to submit your questions for us in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation, and we will try our best to get to all of them. And of course, none of what we do could be possible at the center without all of the amazing support from our sponsors, including Nasdaq, Lehigh University, Bank of the West, Airbnb, KPMG, Wilson Sonsini, Woodruff Sawyer, Microsoft Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, BPM, and HubSpot for Startups. We are humbled by their contributions and hope you are grateful too. And so before we get started, I'm going to launch a couple polls to just step back, see how everyone's doing today. We'll use this to guide the future development of programming. Awesome. Texas, New Mexico, Louisiana, Florida. Welcome, everyone. All right, gonna launch this first poll. How are you feeling? Fearful, anxious, surviving, or optimistic? Give everyone a few moments to submit a response here. New York, awesome, all across the board, love it. All right, I am going to end this poll, share the results. Optimism in the lead, but we do have some feelings of anxiety. I am very confident that our conversation today will help address some of those feelings. So I'm going to stop sharing this poll and launch the second poll. What is keeping you up at night? And this one tells us a little bit about your current entrepreneurial needs. I'll give this one another few moments. Thank you for participating. All right, I'm going to end this poll, share these results. All right, surviving in the lead. I'm very confident our conversation today will help with some of that, but we will take all of this into account. I see finance and sales up there as well, so we'll take that into account as we continue to develop programming. All right, and without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to our special guest, Daphne Jones, author of Win When They Say You Won't. Daphne, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful to have you here.
Thank you, Michelle. Just my pleasure to be here. And hello to the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. I always kind of like to start off just asking a little bit about your personal business journey, some of the people and moments that have inspired you, and ultimately what kind of has led you to deliver the message that you are in this book, When They Say You Won't.
Sure. Well, and thank you again. I was born, you never control who you're born to. So I was born to immigrant parents. My mom and dad were from Jamaica. Mm-hmm. And we lived in a small village called Phoenix, Illinois, very poor village. We didn't have a grocery store, no post office, no bank. I mean, it was, you had to go across the tracks to get to those. We had a lot of liquor stores and a lot of churches. And my mother cleaned bedpans at the hospital. My dad was on the assembly line at the midnight shift. And we had a little 2-bedroom house, no air conditioning. We had radiators for heat, no, clothes washing. We had to wash clothes by hand. She did have a wringer, so you could wring the clothes out, and then we'd go outside and hang them on the line, kind of a thing. So, 2 bedrooms for about 6 of us. Mom wanted us to live, though, or think above our lived circumstances. So although we were poor in this poor town, she, would say to me, Daphne, you're creative, you're smart, you're gifted, you're not just a poor Black girl. And so my siblings ended up going to Jamaica to learn the Queen's English and all that. Even though we were in Illinois, she shipped them to Jamaica to live with our aunt, but I stayed behind. And so I guess that says I had my mom and dad all to myself. Wasn't I lucky? Well, I was lucky up to a point, but she made me, bring so many rocks from the alley, like, Daphne, bring 2 + 4 rocks into the house. And if I brought anything but 2 + 4 rocks, I would, get in trouble.
Right.
She focused so much on math and English that I ended up skipping first grade. So she pushed me really to get great grades all throughout school and not to follow the path of what you could imagine people were like in a very poor town. A lot of people didn't go to college. A lot of people got pregnant. A lot of girls got pregnant, all that kind of thing. So college was in my sights. And I attended an all-white high school. I was bused there. And I actually went and talked to my counselor. And I said to him, well, how do I start getting ready for college? And he said, college, Black girls like you don't go to college. It's not, you won't get in if you try to. If you do get in and you're lucky enough, you won't graduate. And then if you do graduate, no one's going to hire you. And I didn't realize at the time it was that this face did not look like the color or the gender of people who business was made for, right? And so who's going to hire, a Black female? So he told me to go ahead and become a secretary. I knew how to take shorthand. I knew how to type. And he said, go on and become a secretary. So that's what I did. But when I think about it, many people of color, many women, many young girls are really fed what I call seeds of misdirection. Things like, well, girls can't do math. Girls can't do science. They can't play basketball. A Black woman can't be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. These seeds that are planted in us, they grow up with us and they become what I'll call trees of imposter syndrome. And so that's where imposter syndrome, in my opinion, comes, because the minute you want to step out and do something in science or become a boss, you're like, no, but I was told that it really wasn't for me. And so you end up getting paralyzed, and it poisons our passions, it poisons our profession, and it poisons our purpose. And so I did that. I ended up becoming a Women's Day magazine secretary. It was horrible. I did a lousy job because I didn't expect to use my shorthand for business. I expected I was going to use my shorthand to take notes in college. That was the purpose of it. I was going to transcribe it and type it. Never did I thought that I'd be, working for, and by the way, it was all men. And I found that interesting that all men at a woman's magazine, but that began to let me know that life can be incongruous at times. So I said, I'm not going to be a secretary anymore because I've had it with the chastisement. I've had it with my messing up. This cannot be what I'm here to do in life. So I'm not going to be a secretary. I'm going to have a secretary. And so that's what I decided to do. And I said, well, and what these guys have over me is they've gone to college and I haven't. So I said, let me go to college. And so I ended up taking a later trip to college. So I was behind my high school graduating class, and I didn't get to go to college until after they were in already. But I did it, and I got my degree early. I got my bachelor's degree in 3 years instead of 4. And I got my master's degree in 1 year instead of 2. All the while, in my ear, in my head, was this man telling me college is not for Black girls, you'll never make it. And so you kind of grow up, or you enter the professional world with doubts into your mind. But I did get into IBM. I wanted to work for the baddest company on the planet. And to me at that time, it was IBM.
Yeah.
Michelle, I had no idea that I was getting into STEM. I don't even think it was a thing, when I was going into IBM, back in the early 80s.
Right.
Because if I had been told that I was going to go into science, technology, engineering, and math, I would have fainted and then I would have quit, because STEM is like a big deal. But I didn't know it was. So when I think about your question about who inspired me, or along the way, the one person that came to my mind was actually a branch manager at IBM. I was in Peoria, Illinois. His name was Roscoe Adams, and he taught me about pattern recognition. And that is something that I think can save a person's life, can accelerate a person's career. It can improve relationships. Recognizing patterns, find out, he said to me, look around and see who's getting all the prizes. Look who's winning, who's ringing the bell when they get a sale. Follow their path, and as much as it makes sense in your context, as a young Black woman. But what does winning wear? What are they wearing? What does winning read? What organization is winning a part of or joining? How does winning plan and execute their work? And when I say the word winning, I mean, if it's a woman or if it's a man who happens to be winning, notice the pattern about them. And I think as executives, we have to look at the Amazon effect. They're winning. And so as we take a look at their relentless focus on customer experience, and they have a boundaryless focus. There's no boundaries with Amazon. Their healthcare, their grocery stores, their books, their everything. Or Apple's focus on speed and execution. And so, I learned from talking to him that I had to learn about pattern recognition and look at other models that exist and who is winning. So, make a long story short, from IBM, I went on to various roles in various companies until I retired about 4 years ago, after almost 40 years in corporate America. And now I serve on boards. I'm on the committees of those boards, the CEO of a startup company. And I'm out there trying to talk to some of the coolest executives at Nasdaq about winning. So that's my story.
I love it. And thank you so much for, just being open and vulnerable about your personal experience. And it kind of just, encourages entrepreneurs to think empathetically, and how, how those kinds of experiences have shown up in their own life. And I want to ask you something that kind of, I think, might touch on this concept of pattern recognition. But I wanted to kind of quickly dive into some of the more subtle ways that women, and particularly women of color, might experience bias in their personal and professional lives, and what's different now than it was 3 years ago. What are some of the things that are different now? What's changed?
Okay, so two questions. So I'll call it racism. I mean, I know you're very nice and don't use that R word and the sexism word, but that's what it is. And when people believe that because of where you were born, what you were born as, whatever, they attach a value or a capability or a judgment to you. And so it is systemic. Even it's in our education system, it's in our medical system, it's in our judicial system, it's in our law enforcement system. And why it's in those systems is because of individuals. I mean, individuals make up a system, and they perpetuate what has always been done. They're going to keep on doing it. This is how it's always been. So why should I change? And so why shouldn't I let a woman make less than a man? That's how it's always been done. And so when I look at the different things, there's so many things that come to my mind about how it shows up subtly. When I think about getting your house appraised, if you're a white person, I don't know how many times that you would ever feel, or that they would ever feel the need to have to take their pictures off the wall in order to get a fair appraisal. Totally. And it's happened to me. Right. I've had to appraisers come in and say, Daphne, you got to take these pictures down because no one's going to appraise your house fairly if they believe a Black person lives there. The fact that only 1.9% of women entrepreneurs get VC funding. And that is down from, I think it was 2% before, 2.2 or 2.3% before. Now it's 1.9. And so that's a difference over the last couple of years, because this was a 2021 statistic. It was 1.9, and now in 22 it's or 2.4 was 2021, and now it's even lower in 2022 or 2023.
Yeah.
When you think about equal pay, on the average, women make 77 to 80 cents of a man. And so if you're a white woman, you have to work, let's say, into March of the following year to make what the guy made last year. If you're an African-American woman, though, you have to work all the way to September of this year to make, in addition to what you made last year, in order to make up for what the guy made last year. When hiring policies, that may not be intended to be discriminatory, but they end up saying, well, if you've been convicted of a crime like holding marijuana or something, which tends to be a harsher penalty for men of color than it is for white men or white people, then you're automatically not going to be able to get that job because the hiring policy says, well, I can't hire you because you got convicted of marijuana, even though a person next to them is white and didn't get convicted, but was carrying marijuana as well.
Yep.
When a resume is whitened, if Michelle Eisenberg's name came up on a resume versus a name that might be historically known as a Black person's name, I forgot what percent of time it is, but there's most of the time that white name will get called back. And then I'll give maybe two more examples. One, when Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Jackson was confirmed and there was standing ovation, many white men walked out of the room and turned their backs on her. Maybe they all had the same train to catch, seems unlikely, but that's a challenge there. And then finally, when I'm told that I'm articulate by someone and they say, oh, your son is so articulate. And I say, what does that mean? Do you tell everybody that they're articulate or you only? And so there's so many subtle ways that the issues are still carried forward and they show themselves in many parts of the world. And so when I think about what's different, I'd say and I would say there's before George Floyd and then there's after George Floyd. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like the demarcation, because after that, a lot of companies decided that they were going to focus on DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It really wasn't a big focus then. And they started having heads of diversity and just doing different things. Companies have committed money. Goldman Sachs is doing the $1 billion challenge or for people of women of color. Companies like Nasdaq are saying you have to disclose for your board which of your board members are of color. Goldman Sachs will not take a company public unless they actually show that they've got a diverse board. So, those things are happening. And I think it's about the attitude of the organizations that happen. With George Floyd, that resulted in a murder. But when you squelch a woman's passion and you squelch her opportunity and you put that flame out, you're killing her opportunity to grow and to thrive. And so I think the efforts, the conversations are happening. I don't know if the results are showing themselves as we would want them to. And I think that the mindset has to change, because there's so much happening in government and other places that you wonder, are they still living in 2023, the things that they're trying to do? So some of them are trying to take us back before George Floyd, back to the 1950s and 1930s. But I think if every founder on this call were to ask themselves, and because I want to not only say, well, here's what's wrong, or here's why it's not improving, what do we do about it? if every founder on this call or executive, whatever, to say, do I know what the D in DEI stands for? Do I know what the E in DE&I stands for? Do I know what the I stands for? And do I understand the difference between the three? Because oftentimes people put them together as if it's one thing, and you can have a diverse organization that's not equitable and that's not inclusive, et cetera. So if you could ask that question, do I believe that diversity is a social issue or a fairness issue, or is it a business issue? And if you believe it's a business issue, then what kind of diversity do I have in my organization, me being a founder, and how much should we have in order to win in the marketplace? And how do I know? And am I willing as a founder to be a champion in my organization to drive diversity? Do the same thing for the E, do the same questions for the I. And I think if we have our founders to do that, I think they'll make a difference, at least in their organization. But women also have a role and a responsibility, to play. That's why I wrote the book. Is not that society is going to do what it does, but there are times when we drop our mics, we lower our voices, we give our power away. And I think I teach a class it's a $1 trillion company. It's one of my customers in my company. And the class had about 20 people in it, and 16 of them were men and 4 were women. And during the course of this 8-hour class, not one woman asked a question. And so I'm thinking about teaching a course called Women or Ladies, Don't Drop Your Mic and Don't Lower Your Voice. You don't give your power away, because that's sometimes what we do. So go after that job that you think you're only 95%, prepared for, even though you're already qualified. Speak up in a meeting. It's because every time you don't go after a job, every time you don't step in and try to take something that that you could do, you're letting those trees of imposter syndrome get in your way, and that blocks your power. So there's some things that I think the women can also do in spite of what society does.
I love that. And I love the specific examples you gave, because it's like, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, especially like when they're kind of like in that early stage of business, like it can be easy to be like the structure and like way that the system works is like, I am kind of like beholden to it. And there's also like, it's important to recognize, like, as you emphasize, that like they have control over like how they, the culture that they create in their own business. And like, there is a way that they can make a difference in their own corner of the business world or the world in general. So that's just so important.
And I would add one thing. Michelle, I was thinking about when the George Floyd things happened. I talked to the CEOs of my boards, companies that I'm on the boards for, and also the compensation committee chair, because the compensation committee chair usually cares about people. They have a people mandate. And they said, Daphne, what can we do? And I said, deploy the 5 Ps. Go back to your organization and do the 5 Ps. First P is pipeline. When you think about people that can become a CEO, what do they need to have in their background? A P&L. So go now, look at the pipeline of women and people of color that are in a nice executive level role. Do any of them have a P&L versus the number of men that do? So pipeline. Number 2, look at the policies, hiring policies we talked about, promotion policies. Do they help or do they advance the people of color? Pay equity is a big thing, right? Have you done a pay assessment or role architecture alignment across the organization to spot inequities? And my daughter works for Regeneron in HR, and she always says to me, that there's ways that you'll always find an exception here, an exception there, and there's always a reason why somebody didn't get the same pay as their peer. But if you put them all together in a bottle, would they have something in common? Would they tend to be more female than male, that tended to get the short end of the stick? Did they tend to be more African-American and Hispanic than white? They got the short end of the pay equity stick. So I think we can find the exceptions, but put those exceptions together, you'd be surprised as to that there is a lot of commonality in that group. And then there's procurement. Who are we buying our goods and services from? Are they people of color? Why not? If you have a quality standard and expectations of delivery times or whatever, why do we not? And then finally, philanthropy. Are we giving to organizations of color or that are run by women and owned by women and et cetera? And so philanthropically, you can give to them. So there's ways around there's ways to drive this change in a very practical way.
I love it. And I thank you for so many actionable insights, kind of just for questions that founders can kind of like ask themselves to evaluate how their own business is doing and, gaps where they can potentially improve. So this is such great advice. I love it. I want to kind of dive now into this edit methodology that you've followed and you guide us through in your book that you kind of use to like push through these interactions of racism or sexism and come out the other side stronger. So can you give us like a brief overview of what this methodology looks like?
Sure. Let me give you a little bit of background about how EDIT even came about, and I'll talk about what it stands for. It started from the days when I was a programmer at IBM. And you remember, I didn't know I was going to go into STEM, but here I was at IBM learning how to code in RPG and COBOL and all that. So anyway, we did something or had something called the SDLC. It's a systems development life cycle. It's just like a recipe of how do you go about creating an app. And there was 4 steps to it. It was you plan the app, you build the app, you run the app, and you maintain the app. And that's how apps are created even today. Somebody has to plan it, somebody has to write the code, which is what building is all about. Somebody runs the app, which is us, the dating app, the restaurant app, the GPS app. We run the app, if you will, but there's somebody on the background that is making sure that the app is up and running in the cloud. And then somebody has to maintain the app if we want it to be bigger, if we want it to be more global, if we wanted it to have more functionality, you maintain it. So the same thing that happened in that case, I said, I'm gonna do something like that for EDIT. And EDIT is not an SDLC, it's a personal development life cycle. So it's a cycle just like programming is, but it's about change, and EDIT means change. And it's about having a framework for how to implement the change in your life or your organization. EDIT stands for envision, design, iterate, and transform. So just like when you're doing an app, you plan the app, you build the app, you run the app, you maintain the app. If an app can have that happen to it, why can't we have something similar happen to us, where we envision ourselves like you're planning the app, where we design our plan for how we're going to achieve what we envision. And then you put it out there and you run it, you run with that plan. And then at the end of the day, you've transformed from not being a vice president to being a vice president, or from not knowing how to swim to being a swimmer. So those 4 steps, envision, design, iterate, and transform, can be done as an individual. It can be done for a company. A spouse can do it if you want to learn, you want to be a better spouse. A student can do it if they want to be a better student. And so I had to decide that I wanted to change for my life, Michelle, that was different than my parents or the kids in my old neighborhood or the stereotype of Black people or women or people of color. And I decided to use this time-tested, non-gender specific, non-race specific, non-geographic specific system and methodology that would allow me to win when other people showed me and told me that I won't. And if apps can continually improve, like iOS is at version 16 right now, I can use that same framework and make myself better. I can get to a new version of Daphne, and it's not as if creating an app is easy. People that write apps run into budget cuts and company gets acquired and team members leave, but the developer figures out a way to win anyway. They figure out a way to get that app built. So the same thing in terms of EDIT, life will happen while you're in the middle of EDIT, but you find a way to win because the goal is to do just that, is to win and change your life. And I was able to deal with jealousy and outsized expectations and hidden agendas, concrete ceilings, glass cliffs, feedback that was withheld, all kinds of things happened to me, partially because I was a female or partially because I was a woman of color. And using edit helped me to look through those things and not take things personally, but take things strategically. And that helped me to win.
I love it. That's such a great brief overview. And I kind of want to focus in a little bit on like the goal setting aspect of it. And so like, this is like a framework that founders can use to affect change. And so how do you kind of measure how well your goal is aligned to your own values and the kind of like desired lifestyle that you want to have personally and professionally?
Yeah, what I would do is I would break it into 4 categories. The answer, anyway, into 4 categories. First is, what are you good at? And what are you passionate about? If you are good at science, but you hate people, you won't make a great doctor. Right. Your bedside manner will suck. And so you got to think about, what are you good at and what are you passionate about? That's number 1. Number 2, it is, remember when you were at your best performance, when you had an amazing quarter, an amazing year. What were you doing? What role were you playing? Right. And then do the same for when you had a horrible year and a horrible performance or horrible meeting or horrible whatever. And it was that you were at your worst. What's the difference between the two? And that kind of lets you know, I'm better when I'm in a strategic capacity. I was more tactical over here, or I'm better being hands-on. Over here, I was just being too strategic and I don't like it. I like to get my hands dirty. And so when you know what you're good at and what you love to do, and you know what makes a good performance for you, then number 3 is, what are your values? What are what is important to you? Is it integrity? Is it winning at all costs? Is it loyalty? Is it wisdom? Is it faith? Is it wealth? What is it? Because that also helps you to say, well, I'm in the right business because, I want to get wealthy, or I'm in the right business because this company has great integrity and that's what I stand for. That's my value. And then last thing is the question that you've probably heard 100 times before. What would you do if you knew that you wouldn't fail? If you knew you had all the resources available to you, and you knew that you would not fail at it, what would you do? And then when you put those things together, you start to create what in my book we talk about a vision statement. You kind of, because we can talk about purpose, but even closer into that is your vision for yourself. And when you have what you love, when are you at your best? And you can take Myers-Briggs and DISCs and Johari's window. You don't have to just ask yourself these questions. You can use instruments that are out there that'll help you to answer these questions. Then you can come up and say, okay, I know I'm heading in the right direction because all these things are aligning. And now I understand what it is that I'm meant to do, or that I am doing the things that I should be doing.
I love that you kind of broke it down into those like segments and kind of like the different questions that founders can ask themselves to like evaluate how well that goal is aligned to their values and the mission of their business. So it's just such a great, simple framework to kind of think through along, like that's always something that they can carry with them and think through as they're continuing to make new goals. So a really important part of this whole process that you kind of emphasize in the book is feedback. So I kind of want to touch on, why is it so important to the process of iteration and improvement to have feedback? And what are some of the defining characteristics of high quality feedback? Like, how can we maybe find and receive more of that high quality feedback?
Well, so as you're into the iterate, so remember everybody that there's 4 stages. There's envision, there's design, there's iterate and transform. When you are in design, you are designing your plan of action. What am I going to do? I want, I envisioned my plan. I envision what I want. Now design says, what do I have to do to get there? iterate says, I'm out there, I'm testing the waters, I'm in the marketplace, as you will. I am testing my product, and I've got a focus group, and I have an MVP that's sitting out there. But what needs to happen is you need to get feedback so that you can know, am I on the right track? Just like your GPS will tell you, Daphne, you made a wrong turn. It won't quite say that, but it'll kind of let you know, oh, I'm rerouting you because something went wrong, right? And so the feedback, it's about vantage point. And to me, it's about how do you get as much information from your market so you can make the next best move on your game board, or on, in your territory or whatever. There's only so much that an individual can see in a situation. And that's why coaches and mentors and other stakeholders are so important to a founder, because they can see multiple sides of the situation. Customer focus groups, they see multiple sides of you as a company. And I used this example before. I don't think I talked about it in the book, but if you held up an apple and that had dew on it, it looks so pretty and clean and it looks crisp, and you're about to take a bite of that apple, and then somebody says, no, Daphne, don't take that apple, it's horrible. And we're like, well, no, it looks great to me. But then on the other side of that apple, oh, there's a worm coming out, right? And it's has bruises on it and whatnot. The vantage point that somebody had about what you were doing enables you to not only see what you see, but you see what they see as well. And then you make a decision based on information and data. Not that the data is going to be perfect, but you'll have more data from feedback than you would if you didn't have it at all. And so as you iterate, that'll help you to know, did my assumptions about number of logins, or number of people that were going to buy the product in the first 5 days, is my algorithm, off a little bit? And that allows you to say, like Eric Ries wrote a great book called The Lean Startup. And in that, he says, you got two choices for the most part. You can either pivot or you persevere. But if you have a goal that's important, an objective that's important, you don't quit. You either pivot because you change and tweak something, in your plan, in your timetables and whatever it is, and then you get back in the game. Or everything was working right, then you persevere and you keep on going. And so that's the reason why it's so important, is so that you can know what the right next thing is to do. So quality feedback, it's kind of simple for me. It's got to be data driven, and I'm not saying that a customer's sentiment isn't, or their emotional reaction is data, as well. It can come from observation. I think high quality feedback is specific, right? And it focuses on the impact that product or that service or your behavior has on the organization or has on that customer. And so it's specific and based on impact. It's timely. You don't wait, 6 months after you launch a product to find out how they like it. Just like Delta Airlines, as soon as you get off that plane, my God, they've sent you a questionnaire saying, how'd you like our flight today? And so it's timely. It's right after the experience, as much as possible. I think it's also holistic. It's not only the bad stuff, it's the good stuff. And when I was in corporate, I would do something called the peanut butter sandwich. When I had to give feedback to somebody, I would give them the peanut butter sandwich. You give them a piece of bread, not literally, but the bread was the good stuff. And then inside you would say, now, here's some things you got to work on. Here's some challenges that you have in your performance. And then you give them the bad stuff. That's the peanut butter. And then you finish the conversation with another piece of bread. But at the end of the day, you are leading this team really well. And I can't wait to see how you do next quarter. So you give them the good stuff, the bad stuff in the middle, and good stuff. And so high quality feedback, in my opinion, is holistic. In other words, it doesn't only give you the things that you have as a negative. It helps you see your blind spots. It helps you see what you can't see or what you haven't paid attention to. And I think lastly, it should help you know if you're on the right track to winning or not.
Right. Awesome. I think that's going to give entrepreneurs like so many ideas, because, it's like really easy to kind of think like, how do I kind of connect with my customer? How do I kind of like reach them before the product or the service is like already out there? Kind of like, how do I get that feedback in the development process? So so many
Yeah.
important things to think
And
about.
there are examples of how, I mean, one of the things that I had done in the past was, you may have heard of the 6 hat approach. You can get feedback from customers that way. And the 6 hat approach says, imagine you're in a meeting, and this could be with your employees, it can be with your direct team, it can be with the whole organization, as much as you can control it. And there's 6 hats of different colors. There's a green hat, a white hat, a yellow hat, a black hat, a blue hat, I think a red hat. And each, when you're discussing the strategy or a new idea, or if you want to get feedback from a group of customers, get them in the room together, each customer or each employee or each leader of your team, depending on what vantage point you're looking at it from, will wear a hat, whether it's a real hat, or maybe they'll have something that says blue, meaning, like a piece of tape that says I'm the blue hat person, and each hat does something. So a white hat's role is to be neutral and objective. It's facts and figures, just the facts, ma'am. Red hat is emotional, and if we don't do this, we're gonna lose our jobs. They're highly emotional.
Yeah.
The black hat is careful and cautious. It's like a devil's advocate. The yellow hat is optimistic. So if you do all of those, you will get multiple vantage points, right, of this issue that you're dealing with. And that's one way that you can get customer feedback, like real time in the moment. That's truly a 360 view of your service or your product.
I love that, kind of like honing in on like the different, like it's almost like a perspective profile that you can kind of like help guide you towards like different parts of your parts of your process that are working differently for different different parts of sorry, lost my train of thought, but I kind of stumbled over my words, but
each hat will bring a different energy to the conversation. And
yes, exactly.
You're going to say, whoo, we got a lot of data, but it looks like the optimistic and the facts are outweighing the negative hat.
Yeah.
And so now you're going into that situation more with your eyes wide open. And so it allows you to have a persona-based approach, to solving problems and getting feedback.
Awesome. So before we kind of jump into Q&A, I think we have time for one more question. So I want to just close out by kind of like circling back to some of the groundwork that we kind of set at the beginning of the conversation, and kind of like the systems and the external powers that kind of like set the rules for the society that we live in, some of which are in our control, some of which aren't. So and a central piece of that I think is like so important to founders now, maybe even more so than it was 3 years ago, is that authenticity, and making sure that they're really coming forth as a company that genuinely cares about the people they intend to serve. So what kind of mindset might founders kind of think about carrying with them as they're kind of trying to bring their vision to life authentically among all of the external expectations placed upon them?
Okay, so in my book, I talk about how do you know when to be authentic and how do you know when to assimilate? Because there are times when you just got to fall in line. I mean, you can't be overly authentic when you're stuck in traffic. You got to follow the car in front of you. So you have to assimilate. But the car you drive can be one that reflects your personality. And so you can be authentic in the car you drive. And so there's a time when you have to assimilate, and there's a times when you can be authentic. They both have a place in business, is my point. And as a founder myself, I have found that I have to, number one, understand my values that I have, and what characteristics that I must grow or values that I need to have in place in order to win. So there's a gap. I have this as a value, but I need these other things in order to be able to win. And so when I think about the authentic values that a founder must have, I think about number one, the founder has to authentically learn how to be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all.
Yeah.
They have to be open to it's like I think about, I always look at farm fish or wild caught. And if they're in a farm, and this is my old understanding of it, I know it's not really accurate anymore, but if you look at a farm fish, they kind of live in the same water with others. But if you have wild caught, they're out in the ocean. So there's not the opportunity for bacteria and other things to happen. And so you have to understand that what are the competencies that you need to have, and you want to have like something that's out there that says, I want to learn it all and not know it all. So I want to be wild caught. Know when to pivot versus persevere. There's a time when your data is going to come back and your data is going to say, we're sucking wind, and you're going to have to make some decisions, and you can't ignore the data. You have to know, I'm going to pivot and change something about my hypothesis, about my assumptions, about my algo or whatever. And you have to know that, but don't ever quit unless somehow the data says you need to quit. 3,000 other companies already have this product out there, and you don't have anything that's going to be a barrier to entry. So that's number two. I would say number three is communicate. Communicate. Authentic communication where you can inspire, you be yourself, but your job is to empower your team. It's to instruct your team. It's to inform your market about what's going on. So you have to communicate to as many people as you need to. That's in your advisors, your coaches, your board. So communications is critical, and you have to do that authentically as you possibly can. And then having integrity. If you don't have integrity authentically, it's just going to be really hard for you to have a business that stays in business. If you don't have compassion for your people, it's going to be hard for you to, or you got to hire a COO who does have compassion for who's going to be, with the people. Humility. So those kind of lump together, integrity, compassion, humility, and service. You have to be comfortable with ambiguity. Again, if you're not comfortable, you need to find somebody who is comfortable with not having perfect data. And then obviously you have to authentically be focused on winning. What are the outcomes? It's not only about the activities that people are doing. It's about, did we win? Are we going to be on the leaderboard? Are we going to make our quarter? And so those values should be aligned. And that's where I think those leaders should have. But there's going to be the in the moment decision where your integrity is going to be tested. Your authenticity is going to be tested. You're going to have to make a call. And all I could say is in those moments where you're working outside your comfort zone, outside your values, you should take the long view, if you can. And remember, the saying goes, when we are born, we look like our parents. But when we die, we look like the consequences of our decisions. And so if it's going to be a hard decision to make because it's going to require you to go outside of integrity, remember that that's going to have a consequence, down the road. And so I think assimilation, authenticity, they both have a role to play in business.
Love it. So important for founders to think about. Let's jump into this live Q&A. If you are in the audience and you have a question for Daphne, please make sure to submit it in our Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. All right. So I want to kind of jump back to the vision statement quickly and kind of ask, in the case of an entrepreneur who might have like that goal in mind, but not really know how to achieve it. What are some ways that they can strategies that they can utilize to better understand their own capabilities and how exactly they each contribute towards the progress of a goal?
So say that one more time. I want to make sure I get the question.
Yeah. So if you're a founder, you have a goal in mind, but you
Right.
don't know how to achieve it, how can they assess their own capabilities, and how those capabilities can contribute towards that goal?
Okay. Okay. So one of the things that I always believe in, and it's sort of what I may have said before, is understand what you want, understand what is winning to you,
Mhm.
understand your vision. And once you understand that, then you reflect on a time when you didn't think you would win, but you actually did.
Yeah.
What happened? Because there are people who are afraid to venture out there and try something. And there's a quote that says, when was the last time you did something for the first time? And so if you know you have this objective, you should, reflect on the time that you didn't think that you were going to win and you won. So you know you got a winning thing in you already, just a matter of activating it. You
Mhm.
try and try something that, for the first time, because you know that you're going to fall but you're going to get back up again. It's not going to be a fatal loss, hopefully, but you try and try again. And you have to be intentional about your goal setting, right? I set my sights on being the CEO of my own company. I set my sights on retiring, at the age of 60. I set my sights on joining 3 boards, and I set my sights on authoring a book.
Yeah.
And I had never done any of those before in my life.
Yeah.
Never been a CEO, never authored a book, never been on a board before until I actually got on one. So it's a matter of then copycatting. They say that it's cool to be a copycat as long as the cat you're copying is cool. And so you've got to have the role models that if you don't know how to get on a board, for example, find somebody who's on a board and find out how they did it. Copy them. If you want to be like an Amazon, study Amazon's business model and copy them, because there's room for everybody
Mhm.
in business. And so copycat and look at who you can learn from, and then make sure that you get feedback, along the way. You don't want to, they say you can't hit what you don't measure, and you can't measure what you don't see. So
Mhm.
if you can't see where you're going and see what you're doing, you'll never know that you are successful at it. And so I think that's what you do. Have a goal, reflect on when you won before, and let that encourage you. Try it, and try again when you fall down. And make sure that you have some template roadmap, this is a good roadmap here, or copycat somebody who's been there, done that, and then get feedback along the way.
Love it. And so then kind of on the other side of things, could you kind of quickly give us like a brief overview of what the 5 F's are and kind of how they are used to help kind of like assess the goal itself?
Sure. Yeah, the 5 F's are faith, family, finances, fitness, and furthering your career. Those 5 F's I came to realize were important when I was in the throes of getting a divorce from my first husband, almost losing my son in a custody battle. My faith and spirituality was going through the floor, because I was only focused on furthering my career. And even that, I wasn't doing that well, because I ended up getting laid off by IBM. And so when you look at making a life-changing choice, or at least when I looked at making a life-changing choice, as part of the design of my plan, because you envision, I want to get a new promotion, and you design your plan, you have to ask yourself, what impact will this plan I have of furthering my career, that's one of the F's, how will this F of furthering my career impact my family? How will
Yeah.
it impact my finances? How will it impact my fitness? Will I be able to work out every day like I do from 8 to 10 or whatever? Or what impact will my family have on this goal of furthering my career? So an example is when I was at Johnson and Johnson, I was not a vice president yet. I was a director or a senior director. And I got a phone call that said, Daphne, we have an opportunity for you in California, and I was in New York. New Jersey, rather. And so they said, we have an opportunity for you to be the vice president of IT at Neutrogena. That was one of Johnson & Johnson's companies. And I had to think about my 5 F's. Again, it's faith, family, finances, fitness, and furthering your career. So my son was a junior, I think, in high school at the time, Jared, and I had to make that decision. I made a mistake once in my life by not focusing on my family, and I ended up in a divorce and a mess. And I had to ask this question, what is it going to do for my finances? What is it going to do for my family? And I realized that Jared had to go to SAT prep. He had to go visit colleges. And I knew that I couldn't leave him with my husband, and my husband wouldn't have time to do that, nor could I take him out of high school and move him to California. You don't take kids out of high school and move them to a different place. It's just peer pressure.
Right.
It's just this disaster. So I had to tell them no. So understanding the impact along the way, not just in the beginning, what you think the impact was going to be, along the way, as you're executing and iterating on your plan, you have to say, okay, how's my family doing? I told my wife I take her out every Friday. Am I still doing that? Yeah, I'm still doing it. Okay, is she still happy? Yeah, she's happy. Because you have to understand which of these 5 F's are most important based on where you are in your career and in your life phases. You know, when I'm retired, so furthering my career is not as important to me as it once was back in the day. Right. And so you have to measure and say, how are my 5 F's doing in relation to me trying to achieve my goal? You don't want to have these glass balls that are so important to you drop on the floor. Next thing you know, you've lost your family or something.
Yep, totally. All right. We are just almost at that time, but I think we have time for one last key takeaway. So if there was one piece of wisdom from this conversation, or even just from your personal business journey that you wanted to leave with the audience, what would that be?
I'm strongly a proponent about mindset. And Sun Tzu is, he wrote The Art of War, I believe, but there's also a quote that he has that says that a winning warrior wins first and then goes to battle. But a losing warrior goes to battle and hope he wins. And the difference between the winning warrior and the losing warrior is the mindset. The winning warrior had intention, made plans, put together a strategy, and said, I'm going to win, and here's how. The losing warrior just kind of went into battle and said, okay, here goes. So whatever has your mind has you. If excellence is in your mind, then you'll be attracted to things that are excellence. If being a good planner has your mind, that's the kind of person you'll be. If some knucklehead down the street has your mind, then that's what you're going to be. So remember that your mindset is really everything.
Awesome. Daphne, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, setting such an incredible overview and just sharing your personal journey and these incredible insights. So on behalf of the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center and everyone here today, we are sincerely grateful for you joining us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And to our audience, we would love for you to join us for upcoming webinars. You can view those by using the link that's going to be posted in the chat. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you back online with us soon.